Human beings don't just build to survive, we build to remember. We carve meaning into wood and stone, into domes and towers. Not just because we can, but because we must. Across time and geography, the greatest civilizations left behind structures that were never meant to be merely as shelters or displays of wealth. They were statements of order, belief, and of what it means to be human in the face of time, chaos, and decay. In this episode of Age of Histories, we're not just touring 5 wonders from AoE2, we're exploring the real monuments that inspired them. And what we find isn't just architecture, we find visions. Visions turned real by emperors, monks, astronomers, and master builders, each wrestling with the limits of their world and trying to shape something beyond themselves. These are more than just buildings. They're reflections of entire cultures, and if we look closely enough, we see something astonishing. That these places were never meant to merely exist. They were built to tell future generations that once people dreamed with brick and beam, with compass and chisel, with silence and light. Let's wallow. Rising like a vision from the waters of Lake Onega in northwestern Russia, the Kizhi Pogost isn't made of marble or brick, but of wood. Hand-cut, interlocked, and standing for over 300 years without a single nail. The Kizhi Pogost is a walled enclosure containing 2 churches and a bell tower, the most famous of which being the Church of the Transfiguration, built in 1714, which, according to legend, the master builder finished with 1 axe, that he then threw into the lake, saying nothing more so beautiful would ever be built again. As mythical as that sounds, the structure behind the story is very real. This wonder in carpentry was commissioned during the reign of Peter the Great, shortly after a lightning strike destroyed the church which stood on the site. Yet this was not going to be just a reconstruction. It was going to be a reassertion of cultural identity at a time when Russia was undergoing deep westernization. The Kizhi churches, with their 22 onion domes and tiered silhouettes, reflected the old ways of northern Russian folk design, merged with Orthodox spirituality and a carpentry tradition born from survival in a harsh land. Built entirely from pine, spruce, and aspen, the pogost was constructed using ancient joinery. No metals, no nails. The interlocking wood expands and contracts with the season, which is part of the reason for its survival over the centuries of storms and frost. Today, the Kizhi Pogost stands as a quiet wonder to endurance and imagination. It's not located in a royal capital, but rises instead from the remote waters of Lake Onega, on an island shaped by retreating glaciers and centuries of wind. It reminds us that true grandeur doesn't always come from marble columns and imperial mosaics. Sometimes it comes from timber, patience, and a deep knowledge passed down by hand. Kizhi was never meant to impress a court. It was meant to outlast time, and so far, it has. In the heart of 15th century Samarkand, long before telescopes redefined the stars, a Timurid prince built a structure not to glorify war, but to study the heavens. That prince was Uluh Beg, and the observatory which bears his name remains one of the most ambitious scientific wonders of the medieval Islamic world. Completed around 1429, the Uluh Beg Observatory was commissioned by its namesake, who, even though was the grandson of Timur the Conqueror, was a very different kind of ruler. Where his grandfather carved empires in rivers of blood, Uluh sought meaning in the sky. A mathematician, astronomer, and devout scholar, he turned Samarkand into a beacon of learning, with the observatory its shining crown jewel. In the heart of the complex was a massive sextant, a 40-meter arc embedded into the ground, used to precisely chart the position of the stars, planets, and solstices. Without lenses or modern instruments, Uluh Beg and his team produced a star catalogue that rivaled anything seen since the Ptolemies, and their calculation of the solar year were accurate to within 30 seconds, something their European counterparts wouldn't manage for another 2 centuries. But as often is the case with such people, Uluh Beg's devotion to science made enemies, as religious hardliners saw him as a threat and political rivals used his neglect of worldly matters to their advantage. In 1449 he was assassinated by his own son, shortly after which the observatory was destroyed, buried for centuries, and its contributions nearly forgotten. Yet even in ruins, it whispers memories etched into the very stone from which it was carved, that for a moment in time a ruler turned his eyes not toward conquest, but toward the cosmos, toward something greater than all of us. Today, the Uluh Beg Observatory is a symbol of what flourishes when curiosity is given power, and as a reminder that civilization can rise not just through force, but through the pursuit of knowledge. In an age of empires, this was a wonder built not for glory, but for truth. At the edge of Europe, in the old Ottoman capital of Edirne, rises a structure so perfectly proportional, so mathematically precise, that even its rivals in Istanbul had to notice. The Selimiye Mosque was not just a place of worship, but a dedication to Ottoman ambition, mastery, and balance between heaven and earth. The mosque was commissioned by Sultan Selim II and constructed between 1568 and 1575 at the height of the Ottoman Empire. But the true genius behind it was Mimar Sinan, the empire's greatest architect, who called Selimiye his masterpiece, his attempt to outdo the Hagia Sophia, and he certainly was not far off the mark. It was no coincidence that Sinan chose Edirne, not Istanbul, as this was the empire's western frontier, on the threshold of Europe. Selimiye was built as a statement to the Christian West, that the Ottomans are the true heirs of Rome, and they showcase this through their immaculate combination of geometry, harmony, and spiritual design. At its heart is an immense central dome, 31.25 meters in diameter and supported by 8 piers, yet so gracefully engineered that it seems to float in the air. 4 slender minarets, each over 70 meters tall, frame the structure with vertical precision. The interior is covered with mosaics of Iznik tiles, calligraphy, and light that elevates the believers closer to God. But Selimiye was more than divine beauty. It was part of a kuliye, a complex containing schools, library, or the marketplace. It wasn't just a mosque, it was a city's intellectual and spiritual beating heart. Today, the Selimiye Mosque still dominates Edirne's skyline. It was built to shape minds, frame prayer, and leave a legacy in stone, and remind us that the Ottomans didn't just build an empire, they built a vision, one dome at a time. Imagine a sprawling Buddhist monastery complex so vast and sophisticated, it served as a major center of learning and spiritual practice for centuries, influencing not only the Indian subcontinent where it stood, but reaching across the vast expanse of Southeast Asia. This was the impact of Somapura Mahavihara, the grand monastic university built in the heart of Bengal during the Pala Empire's golden age. Commissioned by the Pala Emperor Dharmapala in the late 8th to early 9th century AD, Somapura was designed to be a beacon of Buddhist scholarship and a hub for monks, scholars, and pilgrims traveling across the region. Located in present-day Bangladesh, it was the largest Buddhist monastery in the Indian subcontinent, covering over 27 acres with a unique cruciform layout centered on a massive central temple. It was more than just a monastery, it was a flourishing intellectual community where scholars studied Buddhist philosophy, logic, language, and the arts. The monastery's architecture incorporated both indigenous styles and influences from Gupta and Mauryan traditions, and its intricate terracotta plaques and sculptural works decorated the walls whilst narrating stories from Buddhist scriptures and local legends. As we have seen time and again in this series, Somapura's importance wasn't just religious, but also cultural and political, as the Pala rulers, strong patrons of Buddhism, used it to legitimize their authority and promote the religion as a unifying force in a culturally diverse empire. It was also a symbol of Buddhist revival at a time when Hinduism was also resurging in the region. Despite its decline after 12 centuries, due in part to invasions and the spread of Islam, Somapura Mahavihara's ruins remain a testament to a vibrant era of learning. Today, it stands as a crucial link to understand the spread of Buddhism throughout medieval South Asia, reminding us of how such centers of learning and meditation shape civilizations far beyond their time. The heart of medieval Prague, rising like a shadowed sentinel at the edge of the old town, stands a Gothic gate, not for glory, but for grit. This is the Powder Tower, a dark defensive relic from an age of kings and gunpowder, built to protect, impress, and remind everyone who was in charge. Construction of the Powder Tower began in 1475 under the reign of King Vladislav II of Bohemia. It was meant to be a ceremonial city gate, one of 13 medieval entrances into Prague, marking the start of the royal route, the path of which Bohemian kings followed on their way to the coronation at Prague Castle. But its symbolic role quickly took on a more practical one. As artillery became the new language of war, the tower was repurposed to store gunpowder, hence the name Powder Tower. Its imposing tower fortress-like design made it a natural stronghold at the city's edge. Despite being damaged during the 17th century conflicts and being overshadowed by more ornate Renaissance and Baroque buildings later in Prague's development, the Powder Tower remained. Restored in the 19th century, it was given back its Gothic edge, grim, dark, and defiant. Today, the Powder Tower is far more than a remnant of medieval fortifications. It's a physical bridge between eras which mark the threshold between Prague's storybook Old Town and the austere authority of its royal heart. Its dark, brooding silhouette serves as a reminder that grandeur in the Middle Ages wasn't just expressed in palaces and cathedrals, but in walls, gates, and watchful architecture. It mirrors the kind of wonder built not to inspire awe from a distance, but to command respect up close, not to reach God, but to guard the gates. Just make sure you don't forget to keep it unlocked. And with those 5 civs, we have covered 20 of the 50 wonders we have in 2025. And I wonder, which one was your favorite today? If you enjoyed this journey through the real-world inspirations behind the AoE2 wonders, give this video a like, it truly helps immensely. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Age of History so you don't miss a dive into the structures, leaders and events behind the game we all love. There's so much more to explore, but goodbye for now, and thank you for watching.